In this HeartStrong.com video, I wanted to share with the audience here what I tell a patient who is really in need of making lifestyle changes to help improve their overall health. So I have a whole kind of little set spiel that I give that is pretty much what I give to most of my patients, and certainly it's not ideal. Everybody's different. They're in a different situation. It may have a different trigger for what has made them ill, or different mental triggers for what can help motivate them to improve their diet and their lifestyle. But in the short 15 to 30 minutes that I have with each patient, I've kind of set it up so that I can make sure I could touch all the most important things to help people understand the cause of their problem and the best way to overcome heart disease and make sure that they don't have any future cardiovascular issues, to prevent heart disease and even reverse, yes, reverse the clogging of the arteries that's built up. So in this theoretical situation here, why don't we say that I'm speaking to an obese diabetic with high blood pressure and high cholesterol, and that person has just suffered from a heart attack. So here's kind of how I would present everything to them. Now, first, make sure that they're not having any symptoms, their chest pains, their breathing's okay, examine them, go through their medicines, and go through all that stuff. Gotten pretty good at that over the years, pretty efficient, can do that pretty quick. So then I could focus the majority of the visit on helping them understand what their heart disease is from and treating the cause of their illness. So this is how it goes. So it seems like things are going okay now. You're hanging in there. You survived the heart attack. But from here on out, the most important thing for you to do is make sure none of this ever happens again. So for you to understand this and for you to be healthy for the rest of your life, you need to really truly understand why it is that you're sitting here right now in front of me. Why is it that you developed all this cholesterol buildup in your arteries, which eventually triggered the heart attack? So I'm going to explain that to you. And as we go through this, I'm going to tell you all the right, perfect things to do to prevent any further cholesterol clogging and essentially make yourself heart attack proof. Now, it's challenging to do all of this, but it's very important for you to understand, because you are the one who is in control of your overall health destiny. It's not up to these pills, it's not genetically determined, and it's not just up to your doctors. It's up to you. It's my job to educate you. It's your job to take this information and run with it and get yourself healthy so that you never have to worry about having a heart attack or a stroke or any of these things again. So the cholesterol that's built up over in your arteries that has caused this heart attack that you just recently had, that cholesterol started building up when you were really, really young. And over many, many decades, it's slowly accumulated and accumulated and accumulated, and it's now gotten to the point where it triggered this heart attack. So the arteries of your heart, they're kind of like pipes that deliver blood flow to your heart muscle. And the lining of the arteries, the lining of the pipes, we call those the endothelium. The endothelium are very, very important. They protect your arteries. But lots of different things can damage the endothelium. If anything that you eat or that you do, getting exposed to tobacco, smoke, all those things can damage that sensitive lining of your arteries. And then slowly over the years, with that damage, with that inflammation, cholesterol sticks in there, it builds up, it builds up, it builds up. And if that inflammatory reaction hits a certain point, boom, a blood clot can form on top of that cholesterol plaque. And if a blood clot forms there on top of that cholesterol plaque, it will 100% block the blood flow in that artery to your heart muscle. And that's what a heart attack is. So even though a heart attack from that blood clot might start pretty quickly, happen over a few minutes or so, the actual cholesterol clogging that led to that started decades prior. And that all relates to your diet and your lifestyle. So you need to make sure that everything that you do from this point forward prevents any further damage to that endothelium, to that lining of your heart arteries. We don't want to damage them anymore. We don't want to inflame them. We don't want any further cholesterol to stick in there. So that's got to be the goal from here on out for you. So, okay, now you understand how important the lining, the endothelium is of your arteries and how the cholesterol is built up over decades leading to your heart attack. I really want you to understand some statistics here about heart disease. Now, I'm not telling you these to scare you. I'm telling you these because I think it's very important for you to understand these specific numbers and how it relates to where you are, where the state of the health of America is, and how much you can actually prevent. So it turns out that 1 out of 3 Americans will die from heart disease. 600,000 Americans died just last year from heart disease. That is the same number of people, of American soldiers that died in combat in all wars in American history combined, about 600,000. That's how many soldiers died in combat in all wars in American history combined. And that's equal to what died last year just from heart disease. 500,000 Americans will get an open heart bypass surgery every year for a clogging of their coronary arteries. And the craziest statistic of all of this is that heart disease is nearly 100% preventable. It need not exist. We essentially have a cure for heart disease. That's eat healthy, stay active, stay nice and thin, don't smoke tobacco products. Diet and lifestyle is the cause of heart disease. So what that means is the treatment of heart disease should also be diet and lifestyle, not just drugs and stents and bypasses. Those things do not treat the cause of the person's illness. We really need to treat the cause. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Treat the cause of your illness. That's great. But you need to understand why it is that you're sitting here. What is it that kind of culminated in your whole life to the point where you develop a heart attack? I want you to understand this because it can help you to overcome this and make sure that you don't continue to fall into this trap. The way I see it, there are 5 reasons why you're sitting here in front of me, and 5 reasons why America has so much heart disease, obesity, and diabetes. And here's how it goes. Reason number 1, it's just our human nature, kind of human instincts. We love the taste of sugar, salt, and fat. That was a survival mechanism that we evolved to have to make sure that we wouldn't starve to death. Well, guess what? We're not starving nowadays, but all of those human instincts are still there. Some people refer to it as the pleasure trap, the triad of seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and conserving energy. That pleasure seeking is a lot of it from sugar, salt, and fat. And we developed those things as a pleasurable sensation so we wouldn't starve and wouldn't die. We're not starving now. Those human instincts, that pleasure trap that all humans have, that's not your fault. Problem number 2 is our culture. Because of this pleasure trap and these human instincts, human nature that we have, our whole culture is now just completely engrossed in unhealthy food everywhere you go. Burgers and fries and hot dogs, cookies, cakes and ice cream, sugary drinks, processed foods have all become a very big part of the American culture. You're born into it. From the day you turn 1, a cake is put in front of you, and the kid just starts going at the cake, gets the taste of sugar, and of course, because of those human instincts, we love the way those pleasure centers are stimulated in our brain from the taste of that sugar. That's not your fault. Our culture that's so unhealthy is not your fault. That's problem number 2. Now, problem number 3 is our food industry. The food industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry in the United States every single year, and guess what? They don't really care about your health. They don't. It's a business. They want to make money. Their job is to sell you their product and have you come back and buy more and buy more and buy more. They'll add sugar to their products. They'll add salt to their products. They'll add unhealthy oils to the products. They will process them so the texture is better, so the shelf life is longer. But that processing removes so much of the fiber and the nutrients in that food. But you know what? They don't care. They're not interested in your health. They're interested in your money. So the food industry feeds America. It doesn't really care anything for your health. They advertise to us to brainwash us to try to integrate their food product into our culture. That's what they do. They take the kids to sugar. But perhaps the worst thing that the food industry does is funding research. Yes, they do this. They fund research to confuse the public as to what's healthy and what's not, exactly like the tobacco industry did In the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, there were all these publications all over the place saying smoking is good for you. Doctors recommend this cigarette and that cigarette. And nobody really thought much about it until the truth, which is stubborn, eventually comes out. And more publications start saying, you know what, maybe smoking does cause lung disease and heart disease and cancers. And eventually, after 7,000 publications came out saying that smoking is bad for you, finally, the Surgeon General in 1964 puts a warning on cigarettes. What happens the next day? American Medical Association says, no, we disagree with the Surgeon General's warning. Of course, who is a big sponsor of the American Medical Association? The tobacco industry. Okay, tobacco is one thing. Eventually, we all figured it out. It's not good for you. Now let's think about how food relates to these same tactics that the food industry plays with us. You know, you don't have to smoke cigarettes to live, but you do have to eat food to live. And not only that, with tobacco, it's one thing, it's tobacco. But with food, it's sugar, it's fat, it's dairy, it's beef, it's eggs, it's all these different types of foods, which the food industry can fund the research to confuse us. And it really is very, very challenging and confusing. But the truth is stubborn. And the truth does come out, and we see that now as we learn more and more about what we should be eating to be healthy, which we're going to get to here. But all this stuff that the food industry does, the adding sugar, salt, and fat to products, processing foods, addicting us and getting advertising to us, brainwashing us, funding research, that's problem number 3 as to why it's not completely your fault that you're sitting in front of me, obese, diabetic, having had a heart attack. So now the 4th problem is our government policies. The USDA has 2 jobs. One is to support agriculture, to make sure that the agriculture industry in the United States is doing well and is thriving. The second is to tell Americans what to eat on those little food pyramids or the My Plates. And you can imagine that's a big conflict of interest. We have to help support agriculture, but tell people what to eat. If we tell people don't eat this certain food because it's unhealthy, well, that's going to hurt the agricultural section that they're trying to support over here on this side. So when it really comes down to it, with all the money influences of agriculture and the food industry on the politics that go on in Washington, when they have to decide which one do we do, tell people what's perfect to eat or support agriculture, you know what? They support agriculture. And there's multiple examples of this. The biggest thing being dairy. So many Americans, a large percentage, are lactose intolerant, yet dairy remains a very strong force on the food pyramids. It's because of the influence that the food industry and the dairy industry has on these politics, on these USDA food pyramid type policies when they review these all the time. And it's sad. It really is the way. America deserves the truth. We really need to know what's perfect to eat, not what the government wants us to eat. Now, one of the other things that contributes to this is government policy about subsidizing food. They do things like they subsidize corn so heavily that a company can buy corn and turn it into high fructose corn syrup so that you can walk into a store and buy yourself a 2-liter bottle of soda for almost the same price as a 2-liter bottle of water. How is it that super unhealthy sugary soda is almost the same price as water? It's because of corn subsidies. So then the government on the other side says, well, why don't we go and we tax the sugar? Well, they're subsidizing it on one end, and then they're taxing it on the other. Very messed up government policies. They subsidize corn and soy so heavily so that it could be fed to livestock, so that your beef is cheap, your chicken is cheap, your dairy is cheap, your cheese is cheap because of these subsidies. But what about apples? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. What about broccoli? Broccoli is very healthy for you. There are no subsidies for broccoli. You know why? There's no broccoli lobby that goes to Washington and says, hey, how about us, the broccoli people? Can you subsidize broccoli for us? This is healthy. No, it doesn't work that way. But of course, there are lobbyists for the sugar industry and the beef industry, the chicken, the egg, the dairy industry. All these industries have lots of money and lots of power to try to influence these government policies. So these messed up government food policies, a 4th problem as to why you're sitting here, that's not your fault. And then the fifth and final problem, why America is so sick with obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, and why you're sitting here in front of me right now, the fifth problem is actually our healthcare system. And it's not really the healthcare system's fault. It's just the way that things are set up. Healthcare systems in general, they do want to do what's right for people. And doctors in general, they do want to do what's right for their patients. But guess what? In our current system, prevention is a bad business model. Doctors and healthcare systems lose money if they prevent disease. If they help an obese diabetic patient lose weight, exercise, eat the right things, the patient is no longer diabetic, they're not going to make the money from all the doctor's visits, all the testing that needs to be done. They won't need to have other heart tests and stents and bypass surgeries. All these different things make the hospital so much money. Preventing disease is a bad business model, so it's just simply not done. Doctors don't get paid for it. It takes a lot of time, too, for a doctor in a clinic visit to really go through things and educate somebody about nutrition and lifestyle change. And honestly, doctors aren't educated about nutrition. It's really not a part of the curriculum that doctors learn. So it's just not emphasized. It's really sad. But what healthcare systems certainly will do for you is they'll screen you. They'll screen you up the wazoo for all these different disorders, because if they do a colonoscopy, not only do they make money off the colonoscopy, but they catch the colon cancer, so they can actually do surgery, remove the colon cancer, give you chemotherapy, and they're making lots of money. When a very large majority of colon cancer is preventable, why don't these systems promote prevention of colon cancer? They don't, because it's a bad business model. Same thing goes for detecting breast cancer with mammograms, and heart disease with calcium scores, and vascular disease when they screen you with ultrasounds. Why prevent it when you can just let it happen, screen for it later, and then do something about it and make money off of it? That's just the way our system is set up. That's the fifth problem, and that's not your fault. So I want you to also understand the trap that we fall into because of the way that our whole healthcare system is set up. Now, this analogy is by Dean Ornish, famous cardiologist, Bill Clinton's cardiologist. And this analogy really shows how our healthcare systems work and the trap the patients fall into. And this is totally spot on. Here's how it goes. The sink is on and the drain is clogged. Water is overflowing and spilling all over the floor. And what we are set up to do in our whole healthcare system is to simply see the water on the floor and say, hey, does anybody have a mop? We need to start mopping this water up off the floor. And nobody addresses the cause of the water on the floor, the overflowing sink. So what does that mean? Well, in the typical patient scenario, the blood pressure goes up, pills are prescribed to lower the blood pressure. The blood cholesterol goes up, again, pills are prescribed to lower the cholesterol, and then the blood sugar goes up and a person's diabetic, and what do? We give pills or we give insulin to lower the blood sugar. And we look at the floor and we say, hey, we're doing a good job here, right? Blood pressure's down, the cholesterol's down, the blood sugar's down in the diabetics. The floor looks nice and dry, but guess what? The person's taking 10 pills, paying a lot of money for those pills, having side effects from those medicines, and nobody treated the cause of the problem, diet and lifestyle. Then slowly over the years, as the unhealthy diet and lifestyle continues, more and more medicines accumulate and the disease process keeps on going until, boom, heart attack, stroke, or somebody needs an open heart bypass surgery like 500,000 Americans do every year. Okay. We crack their chest open, take veins out of their legs, reroute the blood supply around the cholesterol blockages in their heart, and we say to the patient, all right, you're good for 10 years. We just mopped that floor up for 10 years. But guess what? Nobody shut that faucet off. So the disease process keeps going, and eventually bypasses fail, or a stroke happens, or something else happens, and they become another statistic. It just makes complete common sense that if you walked into a room and saw an overflowing sink with water on the floor, the first thing that you're going to do is walk right over to that faucet and shut the faucet off or unclog that drain. Go right at the cause of the problem. Why is it that in our current medical system that we do not focus on shutting that faucet off, that all we do is mop up the floor? Well, there's two reasons why. The main reason is one word. It's money. The way we're set up right now, there is no money in shutting that faucet off. All the money is in mopping the floor. The medicines, the doctor's visits, the surgeries, the tests, the procedures, all that stuff makes a lot of money for healthcare systems. There is no money in shutting that faucet off, preventing the disease. That's the main reason why we don't shut the faucet off in medicine. The second reason is it's hard to shut the faucet off based on all these different things that go on with our human instincts, our food industry, our culture, all these things. It's a challenge to shut the faucet off. When the doctor's got a 15-minute visit with you, and that's all they have, and then you leave the room and it's up to you, it's hard for a doctor to really affect change when our system is not really set up to help you see a nutritionist, an exercise specialist, psychologist to help you with stress. We're not really set up that way, but it's changing. As you'll see here at the end, I have something to offer to you which can help you to overcome all this stuff and focus on shutting that faucet off. So when you really think about these 5 issues, our human instincts, human nature to love sugar, salt, and fat, how that's integrated into our culture, how the food system takes advantage of us, how the government policies are really messed up in regards to food, and how our healthcare system really doesn't want to promote prevention because it's a bad business model. Most of why you're sitting here in front of me, and most of why America is obese, diabetic with heart disease, it's not your fault. Maybe a teeny little bit of it was your fault. Everybody knows that they should be taking some degree of responsibility for their own health. They should be eating healthy and staying active. But when you're born into it from day one as a kid, and you're taught a certain culture, a certain way of eating, and people aren't physically active around you, and then everywhere you go, the food industry is doing this, the government policies don't help you, your doctor doesn't really help you lose weight, most of it's not your fault. Most of it's not. But once you really think about this and understand how it is that you were set up to become obese and diabetic and have this heart attack that you just had, now you understand it. If you don't do something about it, if you don't take control yourself, now it is a lot more your fault. You need to take matters into your own hand and say, hey, listen, I am not going to let the unhealthy food industry profit off of my poor health. I'm not going to let the pharmaceutical industry profit off of my poor health. And these healthcare systems, which are not promoting prevention, I'm not going to let them profit off of my poor health. I'm going to take matters into my own hands and overcome this, reverse my diabetes, eat healthy, stay active, lose weight, get off these pills. That's the way to be. You have the power to do so. So it's very important that you know why it is that you're sitting here in front of me. Okay, now you get that. Let's talk about what's ideal for you to do in regards to preventing you from ever having a heart attack, a stroke, or clogging up those arteries any further. Exercise, very important. 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise. So 150 minutes a week. What that means is 30 minutes a day, 5 days out of the week. That adds up to 150 minutes. Or you could do 50 minutes a day, 3 days out of the week. It doesn't matter. However you add it up, 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity aerobic exercise, biking, running, elliptical machine, treadmill, swimming, whatever gets your heart rate up. It shouldn't be so vigorous, so intense that you can't even talk while you're exercising, but it also shouldn't just be a little stroll in the park. It needs to at least get you a little bit sweaty and breathing a little bit heavy, but if somebody asked you a question while you're exercising, you'd be able to answer them in a full sentence. So that's what moderate intensity exercise is. So 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity aerobic exercise, and then every week 2 sessions of strength training as well. Each session should be about an hour long and can include simple things. I'm not talking about bench pressing and doing huge heavy squats with lots of weights on you. Simple things. Start with body weight exercises. Start with doing some sit-ups, modified push-ups, stepping up and down on a stool, body weight squats, some simple strength training type exercises, 2 sessions a week and about an hour per session. All right, that's pretty easy and straightforward. Now here is probably though the most important thing that you need to understand. The most important thing about preventing your body from clogging up with more cholesterol is what you eat. So let's talk about what's perfect for you to eat from here on out to prevent yourself from clogging any further, having a heart attack, or having a stroke. So cholesterol in your diet, you don't need to eat any cholesterol to live. None. There's no such thing as a deficiency in cholesterol. That doesn't exist. There's no daily minimum amount of cholesterol that you're supposed to eat. And if you have cholesterol clogging the arteries of your heart, then you also have cholesterol clogging the arteries of your brain, your abdominal aorta, your legs. It's a whole body process. You should not eat a speck of cholesterol at all from this day forward. Also, the bad saturated fats. If you have too much saturated fat in your diet, your cholesterol levels will be much, much, much higher. So you want your diet to be extremely low in saturated fat. So zero cholesterol, very, very low in saturated fat. Okay, well, let's get into what that means a little bit. First, by talking about how all this works with diet and clogging of arteries. We know a lot from animal studies, from research. So the examples that we use are monkeys and rabbits. Monkeys and rabbits have been through lots of research and experiments. So monkeys are eating bananas all day. And monkeys, they are very physically active. They don't smoke cigarettes. Now, rabbits are eating their carrots all day. Rabbits are running away from their foxes and they're physically active. They don't smoke cigarettes either. And guess what? Monkeys and rabbits don't even get a speck of cholesterol buildup in their arteries. Not a speck. But humans, as young as the age of 3, already have cholesterol fatty streaks building up in their aortas. And by the age of 10, almost all American kids already have fatty streak cholesterol buildup in their arteries. All right, well, we know that that monkey and rabbit who don't have any cholesterol buildup in nature, if you bring it into the lab, stick it in a cage, and feed it a diet high in cholesterol and saturated fat, within about a year, you severely clog up their arteries. What they do when they feed it cholesterol and saturated fat, it's meat and eggs. Meat and eggs. Well, humans evolved from monkeys, didn't we? That's what they say. And what is the standard American diet? The standard American diet is very high in cholesterol and saturated fat. It goes something like this: eggs, bacon, and sausage for breakfast, or a breakfast cereal which has milk on it. For lunch, it's a burger, it's lunch meat. And for dinner, it's meatloaf or beef or pork or chicken or fish. Chicken ends up being the #1 source of cholesterol in the American diet because we just eat so darn much of it. And even fish is very high in cholesterol and saturated fat. Then we go and put cheese on our breakfast. We put cheese on our lunch. We put cheese on our dinner. America has a huge cheese addiction. Cheese is 70% fat and the #1 source of the bad saturated fat in the American diet. Americans also are not physically active enough, although that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is the diet. And too many Americans still smoke, although that's improved quite a bit over the last 50 years. So you can see with the way that Americans eat, very high in cholesterol and saturated fat, that's why we get heart disease. It's as simple as that. But it actually gets much better because we know that that monkey and that rabbit that we just clogged up by feeding it a diet high in cholesterol and saturated fat, meat and eggs, if you take that clogged up animal and put it back out into nature and give it back its bananas and back its carrots and let them stay physically active, guess what happens? The clogging starts to reverse itself. One of the best kept secrets in all of medicine is if you give the human body the right conditions, in a large majority of cases, it can heal itself up. But the problem is we never let our heart, we never let our arteries get those ideal conditions because we continue day after day, meal after meal, pounding our arteries with cholesterol, saturated fat, and inflammatory foods for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then you go to sleep at night and your arteries finally say, oh, we can start to heal. You wake up in the morning, boom, sausage McMuffin, there you go. Injuring your arteries again. We need to give our bodies the proper conditions to heal up. So we know that that monkey and rabbit, putting it back into nature, can start to reverse the cholesterol clogging. Well, guess what? It's been done with humans too. Dr. Dean Ornish, University of California, San Francisco, and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic both have shown that through a predominantly whole food, plant-based diet, you can actually reverse the clogging of the arteries. So what does this mean? Well, cholesterol is made in your liver. So you don't need to eat any, like we said. But cholesterol is also made in the liver of a cow, the liver of a pig, liver of a chicken, liver of a turkey, the liver of a fish. Shrimp is high in cholesterol. Any animal-based food will be very high in cholesterol. And also that's where the saturated fat is. So other animal-based foods like dairy and eggs will be high in cholesterol and saturated fat. Now, plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Plant-based foods, there's no cholesterol in any plant-based foods, and essentially no saturated fat in them as well, with just a few exceptions. So if you eat a diet predominantly of plant-based foods or exclusively of only plant-based foods with no animal-based foods, you will have zero cholesterol in your diet and be very low in saturated fat. You will get so much fiber from eating those plant-based foods. Fiber is great. There is no fiber in any animal-based food. It's only in plant-based foods. You get so many vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, and everything that you need is in a plant-based diet. You don't need to eat the animal-based foods to live. So if you eat a whole food plant-based diet, meaning eat the whole food, eat the apple, no apple juice, eat the vegetable, no vegetable oil, because oil is a processed food. It is pure fat and it's very, very calorie dense. Eat the whole food and let it be plant-based. Guess what happens? Your arteries aren't being damaged anymore. You're not giving it any cholesterol or saturated fat or inflammatory foods. And then the clogging can start to reverse itself. The body can start to heal up. And it works very well. It's been published and researched extensively. This is exactly what Bill Clinton does. I'm not sure if you know his story, but in 2004, he suffered a heart attack and needed an open heart bypass surgery. Big surgery, had lots of clogging, had that done. Just 6 short years later, one of his bypasses failed and he had a heart attack. And at that point in time, they said, hey, listen, you're in trouble here. You need to treat the cause of your disease. You haven't been doing this. You need to eat very clean, very healthy. You need to go on a whole food, plant-based diet. And that's what he's been doing for 7 years. Bill Clinton will say straight out that a plant-based diet has saved his life. He's now the oldest living male Clinton in 5 generations, all because he says his plant-based diet. Heart disease runs strongly in his family, but here's something I have to tell you about how that works, genetics and heart disease. There are 2 different types of genes in general. Certain genes, like the gene for eye color, if you got the gene for blue eyes, there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to have blue eyes. That's kind of what we call a destination gene. Just no matter what you do, you're going to get it. But that's not the way heart disease works. And that's not the way diabetes type 2 works. In these situations with heart disease and diabetes, we say the genes load the gun, but the diet and the lifestyle pull the trigger. So even though you were born with bad genes for heart disease and diabetes, even though your gun was loaded, that trigger never had to have been pulled like it did during your heart attack. If you did all the right things, that wouldn't happen to you. So the trigger got pulled once. Now we got to make sure it never gets pulled again. So if you eat very clean, whole food, plant-based diet, stay physically active, don't smoke any tobacco products at all, your trigger will never be pulled and you won't have any other heart issues. That's the way it really needs to be. So it sounds a bit crazy. Eating no animal-based foods, only plant-based foods, the whole unprocessed foods. Will this really, really reverse heart disease and prevent you from having a heart attack or a stroke? Absolutely, if you do it the right way. To reverse heart disease, not only does it have to be a whole food plant-based diet, but it also has to be lower in fat. So we limit some of the higher fat plant-based foods, so only very minimal amounts of nuts and seeds, avocado, coconut. Those are more fatty-based, plant-based foods. You really got to keep the overall percentage of calories from fat down to about 10% or less. And that is what a heart disease reversal diet is. There's a man, his name is Kim Williams. He's a cardiologist. He's the immediate past president of the American College of Cardiology, chief of cardiology at Rush University Medical Center. And what he says is a whole food, plant-based diet is a cure for heart disease. And he says to all the cardiologists, if you are a cardiologist out there and you have a heart disease patient and you don't tell your patient about the cure for heart disease, a whole food plant-based diet, then you are essentially withholding a cure from that patient, and that's medical malpractice. You can't do that. You've got to tell the patient about the cure for their disease, and that's the way that it is. Okay, now you understand how much you should be exercising. Whole food plant-based diet is the absolute best way to be. Now you got to get yourself out on this journey of improving your diet and improving your lifestyle. And you can do this. I know you can. It's not easy, but here's the kind of the way that you got to think about it. It's going to take some effort on your part. The way that I explain changing your diet and lifestyle to people is it's very similar to learning a brand new skill, such as learning how, for example, to play the guitar. Let's say you never played an instrument before, you have no clue how to read music, but I told you, in order to get very, very healthy and lose weight, get off your pills, prevent yourself from ever clogging up your arteries again, having a heart attack or a stroke, you need to learn how to play the guitar. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to go out, you're going to get yourself a guitar. You're going to pluck the strings and realize you have no clue what you're doing. You've never played an instrument before, and you really need to learn how to play this instrument really well. And if you can play it well, you're going to be healthy. So what do? Well, you start taking lessons. You read about playing the guitar, you join a little beginner's band, you get support from people around you, you work at it on a regular basis. And if you really, really work at it on a regular basis, after 1, 2, or 3 years, you will have realized, hey, I mastered the skill of how to play a guitar, and I can do it pretty well. Well, changing your diet and your lifestyle to give up the unhealthy foods, introduce whole food, plant-based meals into your diet, stay physically active, do all those things, it's really not much different. You got to think about it every day because you eat every day. You need to read about it. You can join support groups, get support from the people around you, and really work at it. And yeah, some people, when they have a big heart attack or a clog and they're trying to reverse the disease, can learn about it and then boom, within 24 hours, give up all their animal-based foods and go on a whole food plant-based diet really quick, a very good, clean, quick transition. That's great when people can do that, but a lot of people can't. If you really, though, aren't a person who can do that quickly, but you put the effort in, and work on it, you can really, really learn the skill of a healthy eating and a healthy lifestyle, but it might take you 1, 2, or 3 years before you completely master it and look back and say, man, I really, really now have developed a skill to not only no longer crave those unhealthy foods and know how to avoid those unhealthy foods, but I've learned a whole new repertoire of whole food plant-based meals. There's 100,000 edible plant species that you can choose from. And I've learned how to make this food taste great and enjoy it quite a bit. And now I've learned this skill of a healthy lifestyle. Just like when you learn the skill of playing a guitar, you don't forget it. You just learned a new skill for the rest of your life. Once you learn the healthy eating, the healthy foods, staying physically active, avoiding the unhealthy foods, it's very similar. It's a skill that you just learned that you will have for the rest of your life. But there's one warning that I must tell you. No matter what you do, you need to avoid letting somebody else play the guitar for you. Don't let somebody else do the work for you. So what do I mean by that? Well, so many people are obese in the United States. Diabetes and heart disease is all over the place. So weight loss and lose weight quick schemes are all over the place. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry with weight loss drugs and fad diets and all this stuff. Don't fall into the trap of going on a fad diet, taking a weight loss pill, or buying food from one specific place and saying, hey, if I only eat this food, I'm going to get healthy. Don't do that. That doesn't teach you anything. What that does is it lets somebody else do the work for you. For example, the company you're buying the food from, they are sitting there. They are playing the guitar for you. You're eating only their food, and you're listening to their guitar music saying, hey man, you're playing the guitar really well. This is great. I'm losing weight. I'm feeling pretty good. And after a year, you think you're in a good place because you lost a bunch of weight and maybe you're off some medications. And then you say, man, I can't just eat only this food. It's been a whole year. I got to stop this. It's expensive. It's all the same stuff. I'm going to stop. So then you stop. And what happens is that company now says, here you go. Here's your guitar, and hands you the guitar. Guess what? You never learned how to play it. You didn't learn at all how to play it yourself. So now you're sitting here with no skill at all of how to lead yourself a healthy lifestyle. And you're going to gain all the weight back. The disease process is going to keep going. You're going to need the medicines again, and it's just not good. Do not rely on somebody else, a weight loss drug, a fad diet, or some company that'll feed you their food. Don't rely on that. You need to learn the skill yourself, and do not let somebody else do the work for you. So now you get it all. You get why it is that you developed the clogging of the artery, starting from childhood, the cholesterol building up based on what you ate, your physical activity, did you smoke, those types of things. You know why you had the heart attack. You know the right amount of exercise to do and the right type of it to do. You understand that a whole food, plant-based diet is the absolute ideal way to eat to prevent and reverse heart disease. So now that you know this and you understand that you yourself have to make a whole lifestyle change, and don't just try to rely on some other fad diet or weight loss pill or whatever. You understand all this stuff, and you understand that all this situation is not really completely your fault. America is set up for this. You get it all, but now if you don't take matters into your own hands, it is your fault. What I'm going to do is leave you with a bunch of resources that you can look at, books, websites, and perhaps the most important thing that you can do is go and watch the documentary called Forks Over Knives. It's available on Netflix. Forks Over Knives is a very powerful documentary that goes through how diet relates to disease, specifically heart disease and cancers. And it is very important. It's put together very well, and it'll really emphasize the same concepts that we just said here during this little talk. So go and watch Forks Over Knives. They also have a meal planner, which is wonderful. That'll help you figure out how to actually be successful making these good, healthy, whole food, plant-based meals. Now, the last thing that I'm going to hook you up with, you just had a heart attack. You need to do cardiac rehabilitation. What that means is monitored exercise to get you worked up quite a bit, get your heart back into doing more effort. And also during this, though, we're going to teach you a lot of other stuff, because what I want you to do is what we call intensive cardiac rehab. Intensive cardiac rehab is through our program called the Ornish Lifestyle Medicine. Ornish Lifestyle Medicine will incorporate not just physical activity into your rehab program, but whole food, plant-based nutrition. You get to see a nutritionist, you get to see chefs and learn how to cook this stuff yourselves. You get to talk to a psychologist to help you reduce stress in your life, to help you get rid of unhealthy food addictions and get the right support system in place that you need. So the intensive cardiac rehab program, including the exercise with an exercise physiologist, the psychologist, whole food, plant-based nutrition, everything that you need in a good support group, that's the way to be. That's how you're going to be successful. So we're going to enroll you in the Ornish Lifestyle Medicine program so that you can actually treat the cause of your problem and not let this ever happen to you again. So that's it. That's kind of a long talk. It's a lot to say to a person. And yes, I actually will go through that straight out in the clinic with the patient when I know that somebody really needs to hear that, when they're at a point in their life, in their health, where it's now or never, where they need to take major control of their own health. It motivates people to realize that they are in control of their own health destiny. It's not up to the genes, it's not up to the drugs, it's not just fate, what's going to happen to them. They have control. So I hope you enjoyed this talk and you learned a little bit from it. And if you have any thoughts or ideas as to how I could maybe improve this when I do talk to my patients this way, or any questions that you have about it, please feel free to contact us. But this is kind of a comprehensive whole talk that I give to my patients. The HeartStrong.com program, as you go through it, a lot of these different talks and spiels are actually in the HeartStrong.com program. So if you'd like to hear a dedicated video just on the monkey and the rabbit, or shutting off the faucet, or whatever, that is all in its own separate video. So you can go ahead and check those out individually, and they'll be a little bit more expanded. So thanks again for watching, and make sure that you yourself and your patients, or whoever it is that you know, your loved ones, emphasize treating the cause of the person's illness, diet and lifestyle. That's what you've got to do.